to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. You're here to rest, and tonight you'll drift through a flower market at sunset where petals glow like tiny lanterns and the evening air feels soft enough to hold in your hands. Settle into whatever position is most comfortable for you. Let your shoulders drop as if they've decided they no longer need to carry the day. Let your jaw loosen. If your forehead is tight, imagine it smoothing like warm cloth. And as you breathe in, take your time, letting the breath arrive like a gentle visitor and then leaving without hurry. Notice how the air feels as it moves in and out. Cool or warm, light or heavy, it doesn't matter. There's nothing to fix, just breathing, just being. With each slow exhale, picture the day's noise fading back, as though it's being dimmed by an unseen hand. You can imagine a quiet street ahead, the kind that seems to soften all sound. The sky is beginning to turn honey gold, and somewhere nearby, a market is opening its arms to the evening. Let your breath deepen, let your body grow heavier, and allow the story to begin. As the listener relaxes, the scene gently changes, and the story moves on without asking anything more. In a town tucked between rolling hills and a slow shining river, there was a flower market that came alive when the day began to loosen its grip. It was not the sort of market that hurried. It did not call out with sharp voices or jangling urgency. Instead, it unfolded with the calm certainty of twilight itself, as though the petals and stems and ribbons had been waiting all along for the sun to lower its gaze. The market lived at the edge of an old plaza where stone steps curved around a small fountain. The fountain's water fell in a soft, continuous thread, the kind of sound that makes time feel wider. Around it, the plaza was paved in pale stones that had been warmed by daylight and now released that warmth slowly, like a secret shared with bare feet and quiet evenings. As sunset approached, the air changed. A mild breeze wandered through the streets, carrying the faint taste of river mist, the sweetness of baked bread from a nearby window, and the first hints of fragrance from the stalls as they opened. The scents arrived in layers, gentle and patient. Lavender first, like a sigh, then rose, like velvet, then something green and bright, the crisp smell of cut stems and crushed leaves. The flower sellers came as if guided by the same invisible bell. They rolled wooden carts into place and unfolded awnings of canvas the color of soft cream and faded sky. They set out shallow bowls of water for delicate blooms and arranged bundles of herbs tied with twine. Some hung strings of tiny lights that looked like dew caught in thread. Others placed lanterns with frosted glass at the corners of their stalls, waiting for the moment when the sun slipped low enough to need them. Above the plaza, swallows darted in small loops, gathering their own evening stories. The sky shifted in slow brush strokes, pale gold, then apricot, then a deeper shade that hinted at violet. And with each change of light, the flowers seemed to change too, as if they carried a secret language of color meant only for the hour between day and night. A person might arrive at this market feeling restless and leave feeling as though they had been rinsed clean by something kind. On this evening, a wanderer came to the plaza just as the first lanterns were being lit. The wanderer had no need to hurry. There was no appointment waiting beyond the market, no task tugging at a sleeve. The wanderer's steps were quiet on the warm stone, and the air met them with softness. They paused at the fountain and listened to the water's patient music. It made a gentle backdrop to everything else, to the whisper of fabric as awnings settled, to the mild clink of glass jars being placed on tables, to the muted laughter that never rose too high. Even the town itself seemed to respect the market's mood, lowering its voice as the sky deepened. The wanderer began to walk along the first row of stalls, where pale blossoms glowed under the last bright stretch of sunlight. There were daisies with faces like small moons and white lilies that held their fragrance close, offering it only when someone leaned near. There were clusters of baby's breath like mist, made solid, and ivory roses whose petals curled in careful spirals. A cellar with soft hands arranged tulips in a clay vase, each one a closed cup holding color. The tulips were shaded in gentle blush and buttercream, and as the breeze moved through them, they nodded as though agreeing with the quiet. The wanderer breathed in, and their breath became slower without effort. There was something about the market that made the body remember how to rest. The shoulders eased. The mind stopped searching for the next thought. The world became simple. Scent, light, warmth, the faint rustle of petals. At another stall, bundles of herbs lay like small green dreams. Rosemary with its piney sharpness, mint that smelled like cool water, thyme with its earthy sweetness. The seller there was an older person with silver hair braided down their back. They tied each bundle with a ribbon and placed it in a basket lined with linen. Their movements were careful, unhurried, and somehow reassuring, as though they were folding calm into every knot. The wanderer drifted closer, and the seller looked up with eyes that held the same calm the fountain carried. "Good evening," the seller said softly, as if greeting a friend rather than a customer. The wanderer returned the greeting, and though their voice was quiet, it felt enough. Here there was no need to be loud to be heard. The seller lifted a small bundle of lavender and held it out, not pushing, just offering. The wanderer leaned in, and the scent filled the space behind the eyes, cool and soothing. It was as if the lavender knew exactly where the day's tension was hiding. "Lavender for the pillow," the seller murmured, "or for the pocket." It helps the mind unlace itself. The wanderer accepted the bundle, fingers brushing the soft stems. The seller wrapped it in thin paper that crinkled like dry leaves and tied it with a ribbon the color of dusk. As the wanderer continued, the market widened into another row of stalls, each one a small world. One displayed sunflowers with bright faces, their dark centers rich like warm soil. Another offered peonies, full and heavy, in shades that ranged from pale cream to deep, sleepy pink. A third held jars of wildflowers gathered from the hills, tiny blue stars, yellow clusters like sunlit dust, and slender white blooms that looked like they had been spun from moonlight. The wanderer's eyes moved from color to color, and the colors seemed to soften the mind. Each bouquet was a small arrangement of quiet. Each petal was a gentle curve, a reminder that nothing sharp was needed here. Near the center of the plaza, a stall stood slightly apart as if it liked to keep a little space around itself. Its awning was a deep green like forest shade, and beneath it sat wooden crates lined with moss. In the crates were flowers the wanderer didn't recognize. Their petals were translucent at the edges, and they caught the fading sunlight like glass catching flame. Some were shaped like bells, some like stars, some like small, folded fans. A sign hung from the stall, hand-painted in graceful letters. Twilight blooms. Behind the table, a florist worked with deliberate gentleness, trimming stems with a small pair of shears. The florist's hands were steady, and their hair was gathered loosely at the nape of their neck. A tiny sprig of something green was tucked behind one ear. And when they looked up, their smile was quiet and easy. The wanderer felt drawn closer, as though the air around this stall held a different kind of hush. "Beautiful evening," the florist said, voice low and smooth. The wanderer nodded, and for a moment they simply stood, letting the scent of the stall wash over them. It was a scent unlike the others, not sweet exactly, not sharp, but deep and soothing, like rain falling on warm stones, like the moment just before sleep, when thoughts begin to lose their edges. "These flowers," the wanderer said softly, "I've never seen them before." The florist's smile widened a fraction, as if they'd been waiting for that question. "They only open when the sun is leaving," the florist replied. "They prefer the softer light. Some things do." The wanderer watched as the florist lifted a bloom shaped like a small lantern. Its petals were pale at the center, deepening outward into a color that felt like twilight itself. The florist turned it slightly, and the flower caught the last gold of day, glowing from within. "They're gentle flowers," the florist continued. "They don't want attention, they want calm." The wanderer found that the words settled in the chest, like warm tea. Calm, gentle, soft light. The florist began to arrange a small bouquet without asking for payment or reason, simply choosing blooms as if guided by the mood of the evening. A bell-shaped flower, a cluster of tiny star petals, a trailing vine with leaves like small green hearts. Between them, the florist tucked sprigs of something silvery that shimmered faintly like frost remembered. As the bouquet came together, the market around them seemed to deepen into a dreamier quiet, not silent, never silent, but softened. The fountain still sang, the lantern still flickered, people still moved, but their steps seemed slower now, their voices lower, like they were all learning the same lullaby. The florist offered the bouquet to the wanderer. "For you," they said, "to carry the evening a little longer." The wanderer accepted it, and the stems were cool against their palm. The scent rose gently, and with it came an odd feeling, pleasant, drowsy, peaceful, like the bouquet carried not only fragrance but a small, invisible blanket. "What are they called?" the wanderer asked, gazing at the lantern-shaped bloom. The florist tilted their head, considering. "Names are tricky," they said. "These are sometimes called hush flowers, sometimes called dusk bells, sometimes simply called the blooms that help you remember you can rest." The wanderer smiled, and it felt like a slow stretch inside the heart. Nearby, a wind chime tinkled softly, a sound as light as a petal landing. The sky had deepened further, and the first star was beginning to appear, faint and shy in the violet. The florist lit a lantern at the edge of the stall. The flame inside glowed, reflecting off glass jars and dew-speckled leaves. The light made everything feel nearer and warmer, as though the evening itself had leaned in. "Would you like to walk through the market a little longer?" the florist asked, as if it was the simplest, kindest suggestion. The wanderer found themselves nodding. It felt natural. It felt easy. The florist stepped out from behind the stall and began to walk beside the wanderer, not too close, not too far. Their pace was unhurried, matching the wanderer's without effort. Together they moved along the rows, and the market seemed to welcome them with deeper scent and softer light. They passed a stall where someone was weaving small wreaths from jasmine and ivy. The jasmine smelled like sweetness caught in evening air, and the ivy looked dark and glossy, as if it held the night in its leaves. The wreath maker hummed under their breath, a melody that didn't need to be recognized to be soothing. They passed a table of marigolds, their orange petals like tiny embers. The seller sprinkled water over them with a small brush, each droplet catching lantern light. The marigolds lifted their faces, shining quietly. They passed a stall of violets arranged in shallow bowls. The violets were small and modest, their purple deep as twilight shadows. Their scent was faint, almost secretive, but the moment the wanderer leaned closer, it was there. Soft, powdery, like a memory of comfort. As they walked, the florist spoke now and then, but never too much. Their words were like small stones dropped into a still pond, making gentle ripples. "This market isn't here every day," the florist said at one point, voice low. "It prefers evenings like this, the kind where the air is calm and the sky takes its time." The wanderer listened, feeling the truth of that in the way the lanterns flickered without wind, in the way the fountain's song seemed to stretch out longer, more languid. At the far end of the plaza, the market opened onto a narrow street lined with trees. The trees were tall, their leaves catching the last light like dark lace. Between their branches, the sky showed through in soft patches of deepening color. Here the stalls were fewer and spaced farther apart. The air smelled greener, touched by leaves and bark, and the faint, damp sweetness of earth. A small cart sold potted plants, ferns, tiny lemon trees, trailing vines with delicate flowers. The seller had arranged them so that each pot looked like a small world. The wanderer paused near the potted plants, and the florist waited quietly. The wanderer reached toward a fern, brushing the tip of a frond. It sprang back softly, resilient and calm. The simple touch made something inside the wanderer loosen further, like a knot, untying itself without being forced. The florist leaned closer, not crowding, just present. "Plants are patient," they murmured. "They never rush. They simply grow, and if they rest, they rest." The wanderer's breath slowed again, as if the body had taken the suggestion. A soft sound drifted through the trees, like laughter, but very faint, like the idea of laughter rather than the sound itself. The wanderer glanced around, curious but not startled. In this market, even mysteries felt gentle. The florist's eyes gleamed with quiet knowing. "Sometimes," they said, "the evening brings small visitors." The wanderer looked more closely at the leaves. For a moment, it was easy to imagine tiny shapes moving between branches, nothing sharp or frightening, only the suggestion of little beings made of breeze and petal and starlight. Perhaps it was only the wind. Perhaps it was imagination. Perhaps it didn't matter, because the feeling it brought was light and playful, like a dream beginning. The florist led the wanderer back toward the heart of the plaza, where the lanterns were brighter now and the colors of the flowers had shifted again under artificial light. Reds looked deeper, like wine. Whites looked softer, like cream. Pinks looked like they'd been kissed by dusk. At a stall near the fountain, a baker had set out small cakes decorated with candied petals. The scent of warm sugar and vanilla drifted through the air. The baker offered a small piece on a napkin, and the wanderer accepted. The taste was sweet and delicate, and the candied petal melted on the tongue like a soft promise. The florist watched with a small smile. "The market feeds more than hunger," they said. "It feeds the part of you that needs softness." The wanderer held the bouquet of twilight blooms closer, and the flowers seemed to glow faintly, their lantern-shaped petals catching light and turning it into something gentler. Together they wandered without destination. They paused to admire a bowl of floating blossoms in water, each bloom a tiny boat carrying fragrance. They listened to a musician playing a slow melody on a wooden flute, the notes drifting through the air like feathers. They watched a child choose a single sunflower taller than their head, laughing softly as the flower bobbed. The market felt like a place suspended between waking and dreaming. People moved as if they had all agreed without speaking to slow down. Even the town's usual sounds, distant doors closing, soft footsteps, a far-off cartwheel, seemed muffled, cushioned by the evening. The florist guided the wanderer to a bench near the fountain, where a patch of warm stone held the day's last heat. They sat, and the wanderer sat too. The bouquet rested in the wanderer's lap, and the scent rose in slow waves. The fountain's water sparkled in lantern light. The sound was steady, soothing, endless. It made the mind feel safe, as though nothing unexpected could happen here, only water falling, only night arriving gently. The florist spoke again, voice quieter than before. Sometimes people come here carrying too much, they said. Worries, thoughts, old heaviness. The market doesn't take those things away like magic, but it reminds you that you can set them down for a while. The wanderer gazed at the bouquet. The lantern-shaped bloom seemed almost to pulse, very faintly, with warm light. Not bright, not demanding, just present. As the wanderer breathed, the florist's words settled deeper. Set them down for a while. The evening deepened. The sky became a wide bowl of velvet sprinkled with a few shy stars. The lanterns around the market glowed brighter, their light pooling on the stones. Shadows became softer and longer, stretching like sleepy cats. The florist stood and offered a hand, not urgent, simply inviting. Come, they said. There's a place behind the market where the sunset lingers. The wanderer rose, bouquet still in hand, and followed. They slipped between two stalls and along a narrow passage lined with climbing vines. The vines carried tiny flowers that opened only in dim light, pale and fragrant. The passage felt like stepping into a secret, but not a secret that needed guarding, more like a secret that wanted to be shared with anyone who moved slowly enough to notice. At the end of the passage, the space opened into a small terrace overlooking the river. The river moved in a smooth, dark ribbon, reflecting the last colors of the sky. Across the water, hills rose in gentle shapes, their outlines softened by distance. Here, the air was cooler. It carried the scent of water and damp stones, mixed with the bouquet's calm fragrance. A few lanterns hung from tree branches, swaying slightly. Their light was warm and low, like fireflies deciding to stay close. The florist led the wanderer to the edge of the terrace, where a low wall of stone offered a place to lean. They stood side by side, looking out at the river. The last of the sunset was still visible at the horizon, a thin band of molten gold fading into deep rose, then violet, then night. The colors changed slowly, as if the sky wanted to linger over its own beauty. The florist spoke as if to the evening itself. Sunset is a doorway, they murmured, not a closing, not an ending, a doorway. The wanderer listened. The idea felt true. Sunset wasn't the day being taken away. It was the day becoming something softer. The bouquet seemed to respond to the thought. The lantern-shaped petals glowed a little more warmly, and a faint shimmer rose from the silver sprigs the florist had tucked in. It was subtle, like the glint of moonlight on water, easy to miss if someone hurried. The wanderer did not hurry. A small breeze moved through the terrace, and with it came a whispering sound. It might have been leaves brushing together. It might have been the river's surface shifting. Or it might have been something else. Something like the flowers themselves quietly exhaling. The florist turned their head slightly as if listening closely. "They like it here," they said softly. "The twilight blooms. They feel at home when the world is quiet." The wanderer looked down at the bouquet. The tiny star-shaped blossoms seemed almost to twinkle, catching lantern light and turning it into something like starlight. The bell-shaped flowers swayed gently as if nodding. The wanderer's eyelids felt heavier, not in a way that struggled, but in a way that welcomed. The body seemed to understand that this was a safe place to become drowsy. The florist's presence was steady beside them, calm as the river. After a while, the florist spoke again, even more softly. "People think rest is something you have to earn," they said. "But rest is a kind of returning. You return to yourself. You return to quiet." The wanderer breathed in the cool air. The breath felt like it reached deeper now, filling spaces that had been tight all day. And as the breath left, it carried something away. Some last bit of tension, some leftover rush. The sky dimmed further. Stars appeared more clearly now, scattered like tiny seeds of light. The river reflected them in trembling streaks. On the terrace, the lanterns glowed steadily. The market behind them was still alive, but the sounds were distant now, muffled by vines and stone. The fountain's song could still be heard faintly, a gentle thread connecting everything. The florist reached into their pocket and drew out a small pouch made of soft fabric. They opened it and sprinkled something into their palm, tiny dried petals, pale and delicate. "Close your eyes for a moment," the florist said, though it felt less like a command and more like a suggestion the air itself was making. The wanderer's eyes closed naturally. The florist lifted their hand and let the dried petals fall. They did not fall onto the wanderer. They fell into the air, and the breeze carried them away, scattering them like a slow, gentle snowfall. The petals drifted over the terrace, over the river, into the night. The scent that rose was soothing beyond words. It was lavender and dusk and something like warm, clean linen. It wrapped around the wanderer's senses like a soft shawl. When the wanderer opened their eyes again, the world looked even softer. The lanterns were little moons. The river was dark silk. The hills were sleeping shapes. The florist smiled. "Those are dreaming petals," they said quietly. "They remind the mind how to float." The wanderer looked at the bouquet once more. The lantern-shaped bloom seemed to glow with a steady, gentle warmth. not bright enough to wake anyone, only bright enough to comfort. They stood there a little longer, letting the night settle. The terrace felt like the edge of a dream, the perfect place to let wakefulness slip. Eventually, the florist nodded toward the passage back to the market. "Come," they said again, voice barely above the river's hush. "Let's return. The market will be winding down." They walked back through the vine-lined passage. The tiny flowers on the vines seemed brighter now in the dimness, pale dots of light. The air was filled with quiet fragrance. When they emerged into the plaza, the market had changed again. Some stalls were closing, their sellers wrapping flowers in paper, stacking crates, blowing out lanterns. Others remained open, but the energy was softer, like the last notes of a lullaby. The wanderer and the florist moved slowly among the remaining stalls. The florist greeted other sellers with nods and murmured words. The sellers responded with warmth, as if the florist belonged to the market's heart. At one stall, a seller offered small sachets filled with herbs and petals. The sachets were stitched with simple patterns: leaves, stars, winding vines. The florist chose one and placed it in the wanderer's hand. "For later," the florist said, "when you want to remember the market." The sachet felt light and comforting, like holding a tiny piece of evening. They returned to the Twilight Bloom's stall. The crates were still there, but the flowers were fewer now, as if they too were growing sleepy. The florist lifted the lantern-shaped bloom from the bouquet and placed it gently in a small glass jar filled with water, where it floated slightly, as though it didn't want to sink into the heaviness of the world. The florist looked at the wanderer with a calm kindness. "You can take the rest with you," they said, "but leave the glow here. It belongs to the night." The wanderer understood without needing to explain. The market didn't need to be held tightly. It could be remembered softly, like a dream remembered upon waking. The florist wrapped the remaining blooms in paper, tied them with ribbon, and placed them in the wanderer's hands. The bundle was warm from the florist's touch. Around them, lanterns began to dim as sellers closed for the night. The plaza became quieter. The fountain still sang steady and low like a heartbeat. The florist walked with the wanderer back to the edge of the market, toward the street where the trees stood tall and dark. The leaves overhead rustled softly as if they were whispering good night to the last bits of light. At the place where the market ended and the quiet street began, the florist stopped. Their voice was very gentle now. "The market will be here again when the evening is ready," they said. "And until then, you can carry its calm in small ways, in a scent, in a breath, in the memory of lantern light on petals." The wanderer nodded, feeling the truth of it settle like a soft blanket. The florist gave a small bow, not formal, just tender, and stepped back into the glow of the plaza. The lantern light caught their face for a moment, then they blended into the market's gentle shadows, as if they were part of it. The wanderer stood for a moment longer, holding the wrapped blooms and the sachet. The night air felt cool and kind. The street ahead was quiet, lined with trees that seemed to cradle the sky. And then without hurry, the wanderer began to walk away from the plaza, carrying the market's softness with them. The steps were slow. The body felt heavier now, in the way it feels when it is ready to rest. The mind felt smooth, as though its sharp edges had been softened by scent and light. The sound of the fountain faded into distance. The lanterns became small glows behind. The river's scent lingered, mingling with the flowers in the paper wrap. As the wanderer moved down the quiet street, the trees overhead swayed gently. Their leaves made a sound like distant rain. The stars above were steady, watching without needing anything. The wrapped bouquet seemed to breathe out calm with every step. The sachet in the wanderer's hand was warm from their palm, and its fragrance rose faintly like a reminder. Breathe, slow, soft. The town itself seemed to be falling asleep. Windows were dark, doors were closed. Somewhere far away, a cat moved quietly along a wall. The air was full of calm. The wanderer reached a place where the street turned and the market was no longer visible. But it didn't matter. The market felt close as a scent in the air, as close as the memory of lantern light on translucent petals. The wanderer's thoughts began to drift, unspooling like ribbon. Not thoughts that needed solving, only gentle images, the fountain's shimmer, the florist's calm hands, the twilight blooms glowing like small lanterns. With each step, the images grew softer, like mist dissolving. With each breath, the body sank deeper into relaxation. Soon, even walking felt like dreaming. The night wrapped around the town, and the town accepted it the way a tired child accepts a blanket. In the quiet, the wanderer carried the evening's last gift, permission to rest. And now, the story begins to slow, as if it too is getting sleepy. The market is behind the wanderer, glowing faintly in memory. The river is a dark ribbon under stars. The flowers are wrapped and safe. The sachet rests like a tiny heart of fragrance. Everything is calm. Everything is gentle, breathing in and out. The air is soft. The mind is quiet. The body is heavy. There is nothing to do, nothing to plan, nothing to hold. Only the steady comfort of night, only the lingering sweetness of petals, only the slow, soothing drift towards sleep. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.